Hey guys, I'm Joe, he's Nick, and you are entering into the combat zone where the enemy only has one of four things to say. Bail out, take cover, abandon ship, or we surrender. I got that right tonight.
You did.
It's not the first time I got it right, but I got it right again tonight.
Smoothest delivery I think you've had yet.
Well, I rehearsed it in my mind 3 or 4 times, as you know, before we clicked on live here in Studio Bunker B.
Bunker B. No
Bunker
doubt
B,
about it.
and we could call it this week Igloo B.
Yeah, you know what?
Because there's a lot of snow out there.
There is. Now, we got in total about 10 or 11 inches. It wasn't the 18 they were calling for. For those of you not in the Ottawa area, we got dumped on big time. And it's funny how people react because they think that this is everything that happens to people, especially the younger set, they had no sense of history. Tonight, just before showtime, my son was heading out, so we had to get my car out of the driveway because I was parked in front of him. And what happens is that you have to, after the snowplow goes by, you have to clean out the end of the driveway again. Okay? So I'm out there waiting for my son to pull his car out so I can put mine back in, and the guy goes walking by. He's a little older than I am, probably in his, he had to be 140. No, I'm kidding. He was probably in his 60s or 70s or whatever. And he's walking these 2 little dogs. And we got talking about what the climate was like, what the weather was like back when we were young. And we both recounted blizzards in the 1970s and, just how cold it was and all that kind of thing, and how people forget that there's a cycle and a rhythm to life and to the planet. And that, because I had told that same old joke about if I ever find David Suzuki, I'm going to grab him by the throat, lift him off the ground, and I'm going to keep him there until I get my global warming. He promised it, and I want it, and I'm not putting him down until I get it. It's just tongue-in-cheek. But the point is that we just realized that life has been around longer than any one individual on the planet, and the planet has seen tremendous change. And even within our lifetimes, we see a little bit of it, but that doesn't mean the world's coming to a screeching halt. And he was a very nice guy. We talked a little bit about that, and we both concluded, look, this is Ottawa, this is Canada, this is February. What did you expect?
Well, it's funny, because a month or so ago, or maybe it might have been 2 months ago, I remember there was a storm approaching, and it was supposed to be a big storm. And so what did they call it at that time? Do you remember? Snowmageddon.
Yeah.
Snowmageddon. Okay.
Yep.
So all over the weekend, because my wife was flying to New York today.
Right.
And so, we had the airline booked and we kept on looking at the weather, Is it going to snow? How much is it going to snow? And I kept on teasing her going, Snowmageddon's coming. It's going to be Snowmageddon. At least that's what everybody was talking about. Actually, the truth was she was talking about like it was going to be Snowmageddon. And I kept saying, yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
I'll believe it when it's on the ground.
I'll believe it because, 40 centimeters of snow, which is what, 15, 16 inches. We get a lot of snow here, but it's actually quite rare to get in one single storm, 40 centimeters of snow. Here, I've seen it happen in many places, but here it's not usual. It's not a normal thing. And so, I kept saying, 40 centimeters, like 15, 16 inches and 10 inches, maybe 11 inches, which would be around the 30 centimeter range. And lo and behold, that's what it was. But getting back to the Snowmageddon thing, I came across on the internet, now they've used Snowmageddon, so they can't use it anymore. So it was Snowcopolis.
I thought you were going to say Snowacane.
A Snowacane. Yeah. Feed me some Novocaine. I mean, it was just too much, Look, it's snow. What do people want? Listen, if people want to give a call in, anywhere in North America, toll free, you could join us, live, by phone. 844-415-2115. You were looking at me like I was forgetting what that number was, right?
I just turned my head to see if...
No, it's firmly implanted in my mind.
Okay.
Unlike yours, okay? You get the intro right. I get the phone number right all the time. That's what it is.
If that's what it takes to make it work, then I'm fine with that.
It's teamwork.
That's right.
Cooperation.
That's right.
I even remember
what
the
show
Sesame
is this?
Street
42, 43?
44, 45.
Somewhere in there. It's in the 40s anyway. By now,
Mid-40s.
We've hammered out most of the feeling out.
Except I noticed that you turned your mic off.
I did?
Yeah, I had to turn it. I was looking at the console here and I'm going, oh, something's wrong with Nick's level again. And then I said, okay, that looks like it's off. And I looked and sure enough, your mic was off. So I reached over and turned it on.
So the button,
no problem.
when it's down, is on.
Down is on, up is off.
Okay. Now, I do want to mention to people that we launched a Patreon page, and there's still some work to be done on the page itself, but we're really hoping that we can talk people into, even if it's $1 a month, whatever it is, if we can have them help support what we're doing, then we can bring this show to a wider audience, because there's no other place from a Canadian perspective who's doing the things that we're doing the way that we're doing them. And if we had some revenue that we could collect from Patreon, it allows us to do things like upgrade equipment, eventually look at a proper studio rather than just Bunker B, do some video stuff as well as audio. All these things take time and energy and money to do. So if you like what you're hearing, then consider being a patron for the Combat Zone. Now, we will be putting up sometime in the next few days a video to announce the Combat Zone to the greater world and to just try to help promote. So the more that you can help us, and like I said, if it could be $1 a month, it could be $2 a month, it could be $1,000 a month, whatever you want, whatever you're comfortable with. We really do need your support. So if you see it, if you see the Patreon link, it's on my Combat Zone Facebook page, and I've tweeted it out on Twitter. I can't think of any other way to get it out there. So not only support the show, but tell other people about it. Tell them that, there's these couple of these crazy guys out of Ottawa who are actually speaking from a socially conservative point of view in a way nobody else is.
Yeah, there's this crazy guy, and then there's Joe. Just want to make that clear, okay?
Joe's a lot of things, but crazy isn't one of them.
Okay, and getting back to how you can join into the conversation live, don't forget you can join us in the chat room, and how you do that is you click on the talk bubble in the live player online and register if it asks you to register. That way we make sure that you're a live person, and just jump right in. Okay, enough with the preliminaries, Nick. Come on.
All right.
I know it's really bugging you.
You're right.
And it's not bugging me so much because I've been in the political world for a long time, so I have a bit of a thick skin, but it's just driving Nick mad. I mean, he's not pulling his hair out, but he could very well be pulling his hair out. The latest political polling, national polling in Canada. What are the results, Nick?
I'm just bringing them up now. I have them right. Where are you? Oh, come on.
Come on, Liberals, what, 38% Liberals?
Yes, 34 for the Tories.
Conservatives, 34.
Yeah, where the heck? I posted on on my Combat Zone wall here.
That's okay. Anyway, the main thing is the others are also RANs.
Oh, here we are. Let's just do this. Okay, Liberals 38, CPC 34, the NDP at 13, the Green at 7, and the People's Party at 1.7.
Okay, so the People's Party is way above 1.7. Guaranteed. Guaranteed they're above 1.7.
That's why I don't believe these numbers.
Which is why, no, the People's Party is more than 1.7, and that's why the Conservative Party is down around 34%. More than anything else.
Yeah, but what I don't understand is that's pretty much the same numbers for the Liberals as it was last time I looked.
Sure. You're upset. See, you're upset because there've been a couple of scandals going on. We'll talk about one of them in a few minutes, but or any other ones that you guys want to come up with, because there have been a lot of Liberal scandals in the last little while. But you're upset because these scandals don't seem to be hurting the Liberal brand that much, and Justin Trudeau's brand personally that much.
The reason why it bothers me so much that it doesn't seem to be having much of an impact, at least if you believe the polls, which I am, let me use a phrase my kids use on me all the time. I'm putting on my skepticals, okay? And what when you've got a scandal that goes to the prime minister's office itself, this isn't just somebody spending $6 or $8 for a glass of orange juice. This isn't somebody taking a helicopter ride to a fishing camp. This isn't just a normal, average, everyday scandal. This is profound. If this were to go through a criminal justice investigation and Trudeau were to be found guilty, he could spend 10 years in jail.
No.
I'm not saying that'll happen.
I don't agree. Come on.
That, in theory at least, that's where that could lead.
Yeah.
I don't believe that's going to happen either.
So explain. Now, Nick, you've been following the story.
Yes.
So here's a test, okay? Explain what's going on. Explain the scandal.
Okay.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Because I'm trying to illustrate a point here.
Okay. The scandal is that the Prime Minister put pressure on on the Attorney General to cut a favor for a major political contributor to the Liberal Party. And that favor was don't prosecute. Give them a slap on have the prosecutor or the Crown accept what they call deferred judgment or deferred prosecution, which means you just write a little thing saying, I'm sorry, I'll never do it again, pay a huge fine, and no consequences. That's what the scandal is.
Right.
And she got bumped out of one of the third most powerful post in the nation.
But we don't know that that's like
explain it any other way.
Well, I don't know. I see that's the thing is these things really are, whatever goes on in cabinet is confidential. I don't know what consultations the Attorney General or former Attorney General had with the office of the Public Prosecutor's Office. Public Prosecution Service. I don't know these things, but I get it because it's all over the media, but nobody's really nailed it down. And here, I just want to make sure you understand this, okay? That SNC Lavalin, which is the company at the center of this, why is this so important for them? Is because if they go through the normal prosecution route and they're found to be guilty, as opposed to admitting guilt with this deferred sort of system that you've discussed already and paying a fine, then they're barred from bidding on and receiving government contracts for a number of years, 10 years.
Yes.
SNC Lavalin is one of the largest infrastructure development construction companies in the world.
That's true. They are.
They're a Canadian company. Okay. And so this is a very big deal for them, but they're not a major contributor to the Liberal Party. In fact, they're not a contributor at all to the Liberal Party because no political parties can have corporate contributions in Canada anymore.
Well,
and if they were a big contributor to the Liberal Party, sure as you and I are sitting here, they'd be a major contributor to the Conservative Party as well. I doubt the NDP because the NDP would be hostile to them. Plus, there's no chance of the NDP ever forming the national government in Canada. I know famous last words, right? But between the government in Canada, it goes back and forth between the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party. They're the two government parties. So if SNC Lavalin was contributing to one party, they would be smart. They would contribute to the other party as well. But they don't. So, you see, this is the problem with me. I'm not saying that nothing happened here. I am saying I don't know what happened here. There's been a lot of outrage, a lot of speculation, lots of talk about this in the media, but it's not making an impact. And the reason it's not making an impact is because the public doesn't get it either. Now, you referenced the orange juice because you're talking about when Bavoda was over in England when she was a minister of the Crown under the Harper government, and she happened to be staying in a hotel.
That's
and
right.
She paid, it was more than $6. I think it was like
call it 10 or
12 or
$20,
$15 for a glass of orange juice.
Right.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. Well, and the thing about that is that that's how much it costs in an upscale hotel in London for a glass of orange juice. Okay. Yeah. That's the going rate.
Right.
For a glass of orange juice. Okay. Once you convert it to Canadian dollars, etc. So she actually didn't do anything wrong. Whereas there might be something going on here with this Liberal thing. But the difference is it made a difference. I mean, people got it right away. They go, $15 or whatever it was for a glass of orange juice. That's outrageous. And even though she actually didn't do anything wrong, that story had legs and it hurt her, and that's why she had to resign.
So you're telling me, are you saying then that people don't understand that the Prime Minister's office, when it interferes in the judicial system, is acting like a banana republic? They don't get that?
There's no clear explanation or evidence. There's no evidence at all out there that the Prime Minister's office or even the Attorney General interfered in anything. And
if that's true, then why won't he lift the gag order? Why won't he go along with
because on principle, on this I agree with him. Okay? Cabinet discussions are confidential, period, end of story.
But she's not in cabinet anymore.
It doesn't matter. If you have to have the principle of confidentiality has to be honored, because if not, then nobody feels free to discuss openly.
Okay, so can he tell us why then he bounced a rising star from the indigenous community out of that job only? Great question. In a very, very short time.
Great question, Nick.
Since you get put in there.
So let's release the fox in the hen house.
Please.
Okay. The former Attorney General is not a supporter of legalized euthanasia. Did you know that?
The former one.
Right.
Okay. Well, it's too late for that.
But what is the government studying right now as we speak? Now, I'm not saying this is the case. I'm not saying this is what's led to it, okay? But the government right now is studying, as we've talked about before, expanding the ability or the availability of euthanasia to include minors without parental consent, under certain circumstances, of course.
Well, they always use that caveat.
Right now. They're not allowed. It's not available. Assisted suicide is not available right now to somebody under 18 years of age.
It shouldn't be available to anybody.
Well, it shouldn't be available to anybody. But I do know that the Attorney General, the former Justice Minister, was not a supporter of legalized euthanasia. Is it plausible? Is it plausible that she expressed her distaste or her unwillingness to be party to any change in the legislation surrounding euthanasia, which would directly impact her portfolio as Minister of Justice and Attorney General? I don't know. I just merely ask the question.
Okay, well, here's the answer.
That's the problem. Sorry, Nick, but that's the problem with cabinet confidentiality. But cabinet confidentiality is absolutely critically important. Executive privilege is critically important in government. You do not want, everybody talks about openness and transparency, and I'm in favor of that, but there are certain things that should be continued to be confidential, and that's the way it is.
Okay, so even if you're right about the plausibility, let's assume for the sake of the timing of all this, everything is so like that wasn't in the news. That could have been handled behind the scenes, in a dozen different ways. But the timing of this, it was after SNC Lavalin was about to be tried for corruption charges for business in Libya. And if found guilty, 10 years without being able to bid on a government contract in Canada. They are already in trouble across the world. The World Bank has blacklisted them. I mean, they're not exactly scandal free. So for them to escape justice, like, why did Trudeau, there's so many coincidences here that line up that make this such a sordid story. I mean, maybe you're right about the euthanasia thing, but it doesn't look that way. And perception is everything. If it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it certainly isn't a fox.
Yeah, well, that's a funny thing you bring that up because the saying is that if in politics, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a horse.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
but look, yeah, I don't know. I offer only in response to your query about what else could it be.
Okay.
I've offered a plausible alternative explanation. But having said that, you could very well be right. But I'm going to ask another question related to this, Nick.
All right.
Okay. Why do we have a law allowing an alternative sentencing mechanism where a company pleads guilty, okay, pays a large fine, and continues to have access to public infrastructure projects, bidding on these projects? Why, if all of this is so bad, then why do we have that opportunity for these big companies, number one? And number two, who exercises the decision? Who has the final say in whether or not that's an appropriate thing to do, to have one track or another track? Okay. So it seems to me that if there's a problem here, and again, in fairness, I'm not denying that this is the problem, but surely to goodness then, if we're talking about the integrity of the justice system, surely to goodness, in a case like this, the first place that we should be looking at, or the first thing we should be looking at, is whether or not it's appropriate to have this type of a law on the books in the first place.
Well, that's part. You want to include that in the investigation. I'm all for it, because why did Trudeau put that in the middle of the budget in page 385 or some stupid thing? Change the criminal code within the budget document. He did that to sneak it through. Why did he, at least, again, I can't read somebody else's mind, especially one as small as that, although it would be a quick read.
I'm not certain that it was, I'm not certain that this was the Trudeau, it was the Liberals that put this in place. Was it? Okay.
They did it during the last budget. That's when it was changed. That's why we have that law. They saw it, Obama do it in the States. You notice that ever since, the last people to go to jail in the United States for what we call white collar crime, you know, these massive bankers down the States who took advantage of all kinds of things and got into some shady business practices. The last ones to actually go to jail were from Enron. How many years ago was that?
No. Come on, Nick. What's his name? Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff went to jail, too. That was the... Well, I'm sure that there were other things. Don't forget Conrad Black. Conrad Black went to jail, too.
Yeah, Conrad Black. There's an interesting case.
Yeah, I know.
But the point I'm making is they saw it working in the States, so they incorporated it into their own, especially once they found out Lavalin was in trouble. And again, I'm looking at it from the outside. When I say they did this, they did that, that's what it appears to me. Okay, I don't have any inside information in this case.
And if there was a proper inquiry, or if the Justice Committee was able to investigate this and get their hands on these records and stuff like that, we might find out the truth. But so there is a price to pay for that, and that's what I'm saying is I as a matter of principle, I agree with the idea that you have to have some kind of transparency and openness in government, but at the same time, there has to be a certain amount of, I hesitate to use the word secrecy, but there has to be an ability for people to be able to be frank, and to discuss openly, including to discuss around the cabinet table confidential matters, without having the minutes of their discussions released to the public.
I'm not arguing about that, because the more I think about it, that's the same thing as somebody being in the military under the Secrets Act. Okay, it applies even after you're out of the service.
Right.
Okay, so with a little bit of a little more thought on that, I understand that part. But when you have what appear to be serious corruption charges, what would be serious corruption charges or allegations, then because the Prime Minister holds so much power and because he is the top lawmaker in the country, that he is the one we should hold to the highest standard. What's that old saying? Not only a scandal, but not even the appearance of one. There's so many things that just stink about this whole thing. If you have, like, how long would you let a mouse rot under your fridge before you moved it and got rid of the carcass? The stink gets too bad, you're going to do it.
Okay, but you know what we've done here? We've gotten off topic, because when you said that, it reminded me of what we were talking about. The issue here is not did the Trudeau government, or did Pierre Trudeau, I've still got his father in my head, did Justin Trudeau or any other cabinet minister interfere in the process inappropriately? Okay. that's really not the question. The question here is, with all of the attention that's being paid to this in the mainstream media, and it's quite astonishing when you think about it, because there is a liberal bias in the mainstream media, okay?
Yep.
I was speaking with my wife about it today, and I was saying, I don't think it's as bad in Canada as it is in the United States. I think in the United States it's very polarized, and the media is very polarized.
Oh, yeah.
In Canada it exists as well, but I don't think it's quite as polarized. But be that as it may, there is a clear liberal bias in the mainstream media. So my question is, I'm astonished, before I get to my question, I'm astonished that the mainstream media is paying so much attention to this to begin with. So it's all over the place, as you pointed out rightly before the show,
right, when
we were talking about this, and on air as well. So why doesn't it have legs? Why doesn't it have traction? Why isn't it sticking?
I don't think it doesn't have legs. How long has this story been going on?
Long enough that, the polling numbers that you cited were from yesterday. Today's the 13th. Those polling numbers were published yesterday. So, that would have been, the survey would have been over the weekend. So certainly this has been going on. I think the thing is, it's too complicated. It's too beyond people's, experience, understanding. It doesn't resonate. It doesn't penetrate.
It doesn't
all
have,
of the other things that are going on out there.
It doesn't have the orange juice appeal. I will give you that. It does take a little thinking about it, and maybe the next poll will begin to show that people have time to digest this and understand it. I don't think the average Canadian, while there are a lot of them out there, you got to wonder, what do they do with their brains on a Monday morning?
Well, I don't think it's that. That's not fair, Nick. I don't think it's that people are stupid. There are stupid people out there. Yeah, don't get me wrong. We all know about stupid people, especially on this show, right, Nick?
Yeah.
Right.
At least
okay.
Two of them
that
involved.
Came out the wrong way.
Yeah. But all I'm saying is, it'll give it enough time, because this has been flogged now for over 7 days in the mainstream media. And it's going to resonate. It's going to start to seep into the public conscience.
And you could very well be right.
And that's what we'll know the next time the poll comes out. And because there's other polls out there, this has just happened to be the first one I found. I looked at that and I said, I don't believe these numbers. Maybe it's because it's such a complex issue that it takes people a while to digest them.
I don't know. I use the term complicated. That's probably not the right term to use. I think maybe it's not so much that it's complicated. People just don't relate to it. It's too inside baseball. It's not.
Maybe you're right.
As I say,
I'm the one that's wrong.
It's not that it's not resonating. It's not penetrating. People have their day-to-day things, and that's the thing about the orange juice. The orange juice is something that when they hear about it, bang, it makes sense right away. This one is going,
okay, cost in the grocery store.
Well, yeah. And so this other thing is, okay, who's calling who? What's the right procedure? What the public prosecution service? What the heck is that? I didn't see that on Law and Order in the United States, and which is another problem, of course, because people, they get all this stuff from the American television and Hollywood and that, and they think that they understand the process, but really they don't really understand the process that well.
All right, well, how much time we got left?
We got about a minute left here.
Okay. Can you summarize in a minute the process? And maybe this would take more than a minute. If it does, we'll let it go till after the break. But because you've been involved yourself in polling, so what I'm curious about is the method that the methodology behind the science of polling, because it is a science. I used to look at a poll, and if it wasn't 1,500 people long, or 2,000 people, in size, I didn't consider it a worthy poll.
Okay, so let's get into that after the break.
Okay. Okay, welcome back to the Combat Zone, folks. I'm Nick, he's Joe, and we are in the heart of a pretty healthy debate about everything going on with this scandal.
I know, I'm sounding more and more like a liberal every day.
I'm beginning to worry about you.
I know, it's terrible, right?
Actually, what you're doing is you're keeping me from going off the deep end and just raging away at the man because I don't like the present occupant.
My good, hold it, raging away at the man?
I know, it's an old term. Out of the 60s.
The 60s, yeah.
Actually, it probably goes back to 1848 and Karl Marx.
I don't know. Just to say, well, I don't know if he ever used that term. What am I thinking of? Oh, Shaft, right. Remember Shaft?
Yep.
Not the remake of Shaft, the original Shaft. Richard Roundtree, I think who it was. Was it Richard Roundtree?
Somebody
Roundtree
like that.
I'm pretty sure that's who it was. Why is it we always end up talking about movies and TV shows, Nick?
I got no idea.
I have no idea
you
either.
You seem to have an ability to pull them out of the air.
I don't know. And I'm shaking my head because I'm trying to wake up because, you know, we had that nice classical music. Now, when you're listening to this show as a podcast rather than live, and we refer sometimes to the break music, okay, when Nick and I are away doing whatever we're doing during the break, and we play background music. And, you know, we've had some blues and we've had some country western and that, and a little bit of rock music. And but tonight during the break, we played a piece by Paganini, which was really pretty. It was a beautiful piece. But you can't appreciate it when you're listening to the show as a podcast. But I just wanted to explain that because from time to time, you know, we didn't play the. What was the one that we had playing for a few weeks during the first break there? The calf branding blues.
Oh yeah, the cat.
Yeah, you thought
blues.
It was cat branding blues.
It isn't.
It's cat. I know, Nick. You want to brand your cats. No, you want to find somebody else's cats and brand them.
I just want to brand cats.
You just want to brand
who you belong to.
You think that'd be fun, right?
Well, I think it's an important thing to do because that identifies the cat and its owner and would save the taxpayer a lot of money because you wouldn't have to print up cat tags. Think of the advantages.
Okay. Well, we have some interesting stuff to talk about here.
Yeah, let's get back to that.
Okay, so let's get into it here.
And we'll leave.
Stupid people
doing really stupid things. All right. Well, this week we have a Canadian.
It was a pretty good. This is a good segue. You know, the cat branding, not calf branding, is a pretty good segue into this one.
They brand calves?
Okay, we've already been through this. Okay.
Anyway, there's a young woman in Toronto. She decided it was a good idea to start throwing things off her balcony. Now, I've watched the video, and she's like on the 20th or 25th floor. This isn't like throwing it up the second-story window. And when you watch the video, she throws a chair out, and you watch it flutter down towards the ground, and it comes down between a flatbed truck and a minivan or something like that. And you don't see it hit the ground, but it very nearly hits the van. Now, the reason why there's really stupid people doing really stupid things is because it's a really stupid thing to do.
By a stupid person.
Obviously a stupid person. So
yes.
Here's a little bit of the story. Toronto police are looking for a woman from a video making the rounds online that appears to show her throwing a chair off a condo balcony dangerously close to the Gardiner Expressway.
This person... So is she doubly stupid? She actually had somebody video it?
Yeah.
And then put it up on social media?
Like, either she set the camera up
good
and self-recorded it or has somebody holding it while she's throwing the stuff off.
Why do people do that? That's such an interesting thing.
Because they're lining up to be candidates for really stupid people doing really stupid things. That's the only reason I can think of, because a normal, rational person would never do this stuff. And yet you watch this chair fly, and it wasn't just a chair. She threw a couple of them. She threw pots and she threw other things. Fortunately, none of this stuff actually hit anybody and didn't do any damage. But can you imagine? You're driving along in your minivan and all of a sudden, wham! There's a chair land on the roof.
I can't imagine that.
I can't either. Like, think of the reaction of the driver. Now, it was on a side road. It wasn't on the Gardiner itself. Okay? But if the person if that startles you, you lose control of your vehicle. Who knows what could happen next? She's putting people's lives in jeopardy. So this is a classic case. Let me read a little more. The 10-second video appears to show a woman dressed in black pants, a black leather coat, and high-heeled shoes tossing the chair over the balcony, which is several stories. Now, they should have put like 20 several stories high. It was at least 20, if not more. I was outraged. I thought it was a very dangerous thing. So the police, started an investigation yesterday. Constable David Hopkinson. I hope to catch her. I really do. This is absolutely.
Oh, okay. So hang on a second. Okay. Newsflash. She turned herself in. I see. I was waiting to see whether or not you were gonna catch that, but she did. She did. I guess she figured, well, now I'm a star, so I might as well turn myself in.
Why? The part that she's not getting off the hook for that just because she turned herself in, because she's all over social media. When you go do something like this, there is no place on earth you can hide, unless you want to move to Hans Island. I don't know if they have wireless up there. But the point I'm making is, of course, she eventually had to turn herself in, because she wouldn't have been able to walk down the street without somebody, calling the cops on her or something like that. She would have got caught sooner or later anyway. It's kind of like Sven Robinson stealing the ring, and then turning himself in, crying crocodile tears. I'm sorry. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught.
How did I know that somehow or other we were going to get back into Sven Robinson?
Hey, listen,
somehow we were going to get Sven into this conversation.
He did it to himself.
Sven is going to be back in Parliament next time. You wait and see. Hey, listen, it's. What's that song you're singing?
That's Shiny Ring.
Oh, okay. Okay, you'll have to pull out a recording of that.
I got to find it, or we'll remake it or something.
But first we have to make sure we're insured against all liability.
I didn't get burned the first time I used it.
Yeah. But you were operating under the insurance coverage of another large station.
You got to figure out where Bunker B is first.
I know. No, Sven is going to be back, I'm sure, and who knows?
What an idiot!
Jagmeet is not going to be the leader of the NDP for very much longer, I suspect. Mr. Jagmeet Singh.
I'm surprised he's still there.
And so he's not going to be the leader. Well, who knows? If he wins that by-election in Burnaby South, he still would be the leader for a short period of time anyway, until the NDP is annihilated in the next election. I was
going to say, they're going to get hammered.
And then Sven is going to be the next leader of the NDP.
Did you say cleaner?
Sven Robinson.
Oh, let's wrap up the stupid.
Okay, yeah, back to this lady throwing chairs and stuff like that. So what was the point of all of this? I mean, nobody stopped. She never stopped and thought about it, and
she just maybe she was on drugs, maybe she was drunk. She doesn't appear to be in the video. She's a very attractive blonde young lady. She just started picking it. She's got this chair up and tosses it over the side.
Right. And Marin sorry, not Marin. Sorry about that, Doug. So Doug in the chat room points out to us that she's already out on bail.
Well, that's not surprising.
Right. She's out on bail, and what's the bail condition? Okay. No furniture throwing.
She'll be coming
it reminds me of midget throwing. Remember that was all the craze for a while.
But the difference there is the midgets liked it. It was a way for them to create an income. And if
it was undignified, Nick. Come on.
Yeah, well,
it was undignified.
I'm sorry.
Okay, midget throwing is undignified.
So is having your plumbing rearranged, but they allow that.
Oh dear. Okay, now we're really getting silly. Okay. I think we have to veer away from this segment.
Yes, we do.
Okay, what's next?
All right. Well, we have to get back to this idea about polling.
Oh, right. We were going to talk about polling, right?
You jumped the gun and went into stupid people.
Well, you wanted to. We wanted to get that stupid people.
Yeah, but I was going to do that after we talked about the polling. So give us an insider's look into the science of polling.
Oh, the science of polling,
You're far more a scientist than I am.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, look, polling is all about probabilities, and there are mathematical calculations. It's the math is actually very complicated, but what you try to do is you go out there if you're actually asking questions with live people calling and asking the questions from people who are answering the telephones, which is, by the way, is, slowly, I think that's still the gold standard for polling, but telephone electronic polling has become a bit of all the rage in political circles now, where, people ask you the question on the phone and you press 1, press 2, press 3, that kind of thing. It's a recording. It's all recorded. So, but polling is all about getting an adequate sample size to be able to extrapolate. Okay.
I like that word.
Extrapolate. I know you do. That's why I emphasized it. I was looking. You guys can't see this because we're not on video, but I was looking
for that
intently at Nick, and it was because I was emphasizing the word. It was nothing other than that, guys. I promise. Okay. Okay, I promise. And yeah, no, it's all about you get enough people where you can come up with a mathematical equation based on probabilities, that the opinion or the percentage of people who hold a particular opinion in that constituency, wherever it is, you could say, that you can extrapolate and say, 50% of people believe this, even without asking the 50%. So it's all a mathematical thing. And I'm butchering this segment totally because I have to get into, how do you come up with what is an adequate sample size, et cetera. But it is scientific, and it's not right all the time. That's why you'll always hear, a sample size this size is accurate plus or minus, 3 points, 19 times out of 20. That's all probability stuff. Okay. So these are mathematical calculations, but they are pretty accurate. You can predict, outcomes, based on the income using small sample sizes, but you have to have, we have to have a representative sample. In other words, if you want to know what people think in Ontario, then you have to talk to people in Ontario. If you want to know what people think across Ontario, if you're doing polling, for instance, for political parties, then, you might want to survey 2,000 people or 2,300 people across the country, but it's important that you get a minimum number of people in each riding or in each geographical region.
So across the province.
So it's not just, so that you have to have a certain distribution as well, and you have to have a minimum number of people. And the smaller the region and the smaller number of people that you're trying to survey, the smaller the sample size has to be. So as I said, I've butchered it. I have not given it much, I have not given it any justice whatsoever. The real thing you have to watch out for in polling, Nick, is not the sample size. That's important. And it's not the how they've calculated things. All of those things are important. But the real thing you have to be careful about is the questions. Because you can elicit exactly, the same, talk to the same group of people on the same subject and get opposite responses, totally different responses based on the way the question is worded. And sometimes the way, not just the way the question is worded, but just the way it's asked and the order the questions are asked. So when they ask questions, if there are 3 questions, they will, in order to ensure that everything is as random as possible and that a question is not influencing the answer.
Or a leading question. Yeah.
Okay. And we call that push polling, where you design, you have 3 questions or 2 or 3 questions, that are designed to evoke a certain emotional response in the person. And then you hit them with the 4th question. And your whole idea is you want to get them to answer the 4th question a certain way. So the first 3 questions have led them to that answer. That's what push polling is.
Okay.
And if you're into real polling properly, then you don't do push polling, or shouldn't do push polling. But you can influence the answer simply by asking the questions prior to the answer to question number 3, asking those questions in a certain order all the time. So what you do is, if you have 3 questions, you randomize the order that you're asking them in. Anyway, we're getting really down into the weeds here.
Yeah,
I don't know how interested people are.
Let me bring this back up to the macro level. There are certain polling companies out there that will take a look at all the different polls, gel them down, and say, we took 20 different polls and distilled them all down, and here's what the average is based on those polls.
Right.
Is that any more accurate than looking at an individual polling company like Nanos or Ipsos or any of these guys?
Well, the biblical, the proverb, right? There's wisdom in numbers, right? Mm-hmm. Or I'm paraphrasing, of course.
Yeah.
But if you take a number of polls and you aggregate the results, that means you put them all together and you come up with average results, etc. Then presumably the average that you're coming up with is probably more accurate than the individual polls that have gone into it. Presumably. I don't necessarily subscribe to that theory, but there is some logic in that argument. Your average polls, the thing about having aggregate polls like that is that you get rid of the outliers. In other words, when you're doing a lot of polling, every now and then, when they say it's accurate to within 1 or 2, plus or minus 1 or 2 percentage points, 19 times out of 20. Well, every now and then you're going to get that one time out of the 20.
So you weed them out.
So every now and then you'll have something that would be an outlier, which means the results are just not, they don't fit into the proper framework, not because we reject the results saying, well, we don't like that answer, so we're only going to use the answers we like. But sometimes the polling just, you look at it and go, okay, that's just not accurate. Like you were saying, you're going tonight, you're saying, what, it's that the Liberals are at 38% and the Conservatives are at 34%. That can't be right. I happen to think that's right, but I'll tell you what I don't think is right. I don't think it's right that Maxime Bernier's People's Party is sitting at 1.7% nationally. And if it is sitting at 1.7% nationally, here's the last point I'm going to make about polling, at least political polling. You take the Bloc Québécois, for instance, and you say the Bloc Québécois is polling at what, 5% or whatever, 4, 5, 6% nationally?
Yeah, it was 3.7 or 6.
But they're only running candidates in the province of Quebec.
Right.
So what they're polling is nationally is irrelevant. The question is, how strongly are they polling where they're running candidates? So you're trying to inject a national result into something that's much more focused regionally. And I think that I don't believe that the People's Party is polling under 2% nationally. But even if they are, I don't believe that is reflective of the impact that they are going to have moving forward. I think that the People's Party in Canada, under Maxime Bernier, I will be surprised if they elect any members to Parliament in the next general election. I will be surprised, but what I am quite certain of is that they are going to hurt the Conservative Party by pulling votes away from the Conservative candidates in the ridings where they're running. Now,
since we're talking about the People's Party anyway, and it's a great way to round out the hour, there's no denying that Maxine and his crew are raising money like wildfire. And now there's, as you and I have discussed before, there's more to running a campaign than having a fat bank account. That's always a bonus. There's no doubt about it. But it's the groundwork, the team on the ground that gets people elected. Do you think it's possible? Like, I know you're saying that you don't expect him to get anybody elected. What about even just him? Do you think there's enough momentum for him to get elected?
Well, you would think that he would be the person with the greatest chance of being elected. I can't say that I would be surprised if he wasn't, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was. I haven't been following the polling in his riding.
Yeah.
But, I know Maxime Bernier, and I know that Maxime Bernier is he's a very decent guy. He's a force to be reckoned with. There are many things that I am very sympathetic to. I wish that he had found a way to stay within the Conservative Party framework, because I think he brings a lot of solid ideas to the party that have to be considered, and a lot of ideas that I personally would support. But I don't think that he did the right thing by breaking off and starting a new political party. Having said that, he's a force to be reckoned with in his home riding of Beauce, which is in the Quebec City region in Quebec, the province of Quebec, and it's a rural area, and his family has deep roots there. His father represented the area for a while. Was a minister in Brian Mulroney's cabinet. He's well liked, well respected. So, but I don't know what the impact of him deciding to resign from the Conservative Party and start his own political party. I don't know what impact that will have in that riding.
Because a lot of people like Max because he is a lot more. The term I want to use is blue collar, and I don't mean that in a working man's kind of way. I'm talking about he speaks off the cuff. He's somebody who will tell you what he thinks and isn't apologetic about it. He's the kind of person that has a very magnetic personality because there's a strength to his character. And that's really been lacking in Canadian politics.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm wondering about what his real chances are. I mean, nobody knows till Election Day, but it's just when you look at this and you say Maxime Bernier, the image that comes to mind is, well, there's two. One of him holding hands with a rather buxom young lady from years ago. But the other more recent one is him standing up, I don't want to say speaking truth to power, but standing up for what he believes in to the point where he was willing to walk away from a well-established party and take a huge gamble by starting his own party along, and it'll be his party. I don't think there's any doubt about it. It'll be what Maxime Bernier wants it to be. And a lot of people have been looking for that kind of leadership.
Yeah, he's, he stands on principle. And I have a lot of respect and admiration for Maxime Bernier. Even on the things that I disagree with him on, I think he, as I said before, I think, he brings a lot to the table, and the ideas, many of the ideas that he has, I'm very sympathetic to. I think that you have to be practical as well. I don't know how practical he is in terms of how you would implement some of these ideas. Like, it's very easy to say, let's get rid of supply management. And Nick, I'm not a fan of supply management.
Right.
Dairy quotas and chicken quotas and egg quotas and all of these things. I dislike them. But, do you wake up one morning and say, okay, we're going to pull the plug on that? Or do you find ways to transition, etc.? I think that Max would be more inclined. I'm not saying that he would agree to simply pull the plug and say, let's get rid of this cold turkey. But I think that he would be more inclined to taking that approach than, say, a Brad Trost, for instance, who I was working for in the leadership campaign, who also agreed that we had to get rid of supply management, but you had to do it in a way that was going to not cause a lot of economic dislocation for those people who have come to depend on supply management for their livelihood.
Right.
So you had a Brad Trost and a few other people who were talking about it during the campaign, who were in favor of getting rid of supply management, but wanted to have some kind of a measured transitional period, whereas you had on the other hand, there were three. You had the people that were talking that way, then you had the people who were saying, no, we're going to maintain supply management, and then you had people like Max, or just Max, who was saying, no, we're going to get rid of it. Did he have in his mind that we had to manage getting rid of it over a period of time? I don't know, but he didn't really talk that way when they were talking about it during the leadership campaign. But it'll be interesting. If we live in interesting times, that's
the old
the saying
curse
goes,
yep.
right?
Yeah, and that is certainly true. All right, we're at the top of the hour. Time for us to take our first hour break. And we're going to go run off and get a coffee or something like that. You guys stay right there. We'll be back. We will be back with more on the Combat Zone with Dick and Joe.
Okay, I am Joe. He is Nick, and you are coming back into the Combat Zone.
Even frontline troops need a break once in a while.
Yeah, we sure do. Yeah,
I was talking about the audience.
Oh, okay. So what you're saying is that we're like sort of at the back, and we're throwing them into the front lines.
Well, remember that airplane called the Lysander?
The which?
The Lysander or the Lysander, depending on where you're from.
I don't remember it.
It was a observation aircraft used by the British Army during World War II, and the officers would fly out of harm's way above the battlefield to get an idea of what was going on in these little airplanes. And as long as there was no enemy fighters around, they could do their job. Another one, the Germans had one called the Stork. Actually, I think the Lysander was British. The Americans had one called the Piper Cub, which is very popular still today. Anyway, that's not...
Hey, I've flown in one of those Cubs.
Piper Cub?
Yeah. The old ones.
Yeah.
The old tail dragger.
They haven't made them in that configuration since about, the end of the war.
When I was in glider pilot school, that was one of the tow planes that we had, for dragging us up to 4,000 feet.
So you could pull the red knob on the dash.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Well, I mean, but there was a little bit more involved than that because...
Yeah, I'm making it simple, but yeah, I'm still on fire about this whole air...
Right, you went flying...
I went flying? Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, people, we have to take a minute. Nick has got to talk to you guys about his flying experience this weekend.
Telling you, first of all, at Christmas time, I have been passionate about airplanes since I was in diapers. I just absolutely love everything about them. I have studied them all my life. I know how they work. I know when I graduated high school, I had a binder 2.5 inches thick. And inside the binder was cutouts from magazines, pictures, and handwritten notes on everything that had ever flown that mankind had produced. From the Wright Flyer and the Kitty Hawk all the way up to the space shuttle, which was the current technology in 1980 when I was getting out. And I knew all their stats, all their figures, ranges, ceilings, weapons if they had them. So I was nuts about airplanes. And then I joined the Navy for 10 years. Go figure. But anyway, I've been lately, in the last few years, been getting a more and more intense burn to get my own private pilot's license. I'm getting a little older now. I'm not a spring chicken anymore. And I want to get a pilot's license while I'm still young enough to use it. So I've been kind of plotting and planning about different airplanes and what would I buy and, where would I learn and all that stuff. And my kids bought me an hour airtime from the Aviation Museum. There's a guy who operates out of there with the biplane tours in the summertime over the city. If you've ever been to the nation's capital, you look up on a nice summer day, you'll see this biplane flying around. That's the guy. His name is Greg. And he and 2 other pilots run this air service. Well, in the wintertime, it's just Greg. He's the owner. And I rented an hour from him. We went up in his Grumman Cheetah, and we're flying around, and I have my wife, Allison, with me in the back. Now, the whole time we're talking about how exciting this is going to be and how much fun it's going to be. And I'm like a kid in a candy store. Just walking through the Aviation Museum was amazing. And looking at all the airplanes, and I'm walking through going, this is this, and this is that, and this is this, and that, and, picking off 90% of the airplanes. And then finally we get a chance to go up in this Grumman. So we get in, get strapped in, take off. Allison is just terrified in the back seat because there's some turbulence, and she didn't know what to expect. Her flying is like WestJet, okay, or Air Canada or commercial carriers. She's never been in a small airplane before. It doesn't bother me because I knew what to expect. And she's in the back having a heart attack through the whole hour. And she says, you have no idea how many times I swore and prayed in the same sentence. It was just like, she said, if there was a parachute, I would have bailed out. So 50% of the flight, I actually get to fly. Okay. The guy says, you want to take it? And I said, I thought you'd never ask. So I'm flying along, and it's not hard. It's not difficult. As long as you take things nice and easy and slow, get used to how the plane handles, nothing fancy. We just went out to Arnprior, looped out over there, back over the city. And as we're coming back, he says, I want you to put in a slow descent, but bring it down to about 1,200 feet. And I can see the Aviation Museum right in front of us. Okay. So I put the nose down a little bit. He says, now slowly bring the power down until you get to about 1,500 RPM. Thinking, okay, he's setting us up for a landing. But he hasn't taken the controls back yet. And at one point, about 3-4 times, he turns over his shoulder and he says to my wife, he's doing great. He puts his arm across the back of my seat. She picks up his arm and puts it back in the front. So as we're lining up on the runway, we get to about 600-700 feet. Allison's from the back. She says, okay, the pilot can take it now. I said, he's going to let me land it. No, it's okay. He can land it. So she made it very clear she didn't want me landing the airplane, but I was that close. And it was just, what a blast. And she was terrified. She was so exhausted she could barely walk from all the adrenaline. And I was on the absolute other extreme. So I said, sweetheart, I'll make you this promise. I will never take you up on another airplane ride unless you specifically ask to come. But I think after 3 or 4 more trips and she's got a chance to get used to the turbulence, she'll be fine. She really has a warrior's heart. So I'm not worried about it in the long run, but she was pretty scared because she wasn't used to, bouncing around like a ping pong ball in the back seat. So other than that, it was a fantastic flight. Great day. Loved it. And I would fly with Greg any day. So if you want to go for a flight and enjoy yourself, go and see them at the Aviation Museum, the historic biplane flights. I don't know how much flying they'll do. That depends on how much flying you'll get to do. That depends on Greg and what his comfort level is. I can't promise anybody anything. It's not my airplane. But at least get up there and go and have a look at the nation's capital. It's beautiful. What a great way to spend an hour.
If you're in Ottawa.
Yeah, if you're...
But there's a lot of little flag clubs everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
It's quite an experience.
It is. And you don't have to be in Ottawa. You get up in the air and you see 2 things you figure out in a hurry. One is how big the planet really is and how few cars there are. You fly over the 417 and you think, I don't got to worry about...
Oh, yeah. Listen, it's not so much how big the Earth is, but how little impact we actually have on the environment, at least visually. I mean, there's a lot of undeveloped space out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of space, period. When you find yourself in a large urban area, like a metropolitan Toronto, flying over metropolitan Toronto, like in New York City, like a Los Angeles area, like a Chicago area, where it's quite built up and urban and sprawling. Okay. It gives you a very skewed, a very wrong impression about how developed the Earth is and how much space there really is. There is a lot of space on this planet. There is a lot of space on this planet that's not inhabited. There's a lot of space that's hasn't been cultivated, or anything like that, especially in a country like Canada.
Oh yeah. We are not running, but regardless of what David Suzuki says, we are not running out of room.
No, but I was going to suggest that, probably, your wife should have done a little toking before she flew, and then it would have been a completely different experience for her. And if she had done that, Nick, okay, if she'd done that, it would have been a lot easier and cheaper for her to buy the marijuana on the black market.
Well, according to the Scotiabank, the great segue, by the way, according to Scotiabank, I know I have the article here, but in essence, what the article says is that the idea of liberalizing or legalizing cannabis has been a farce, because the black market is still going to control 71% of all pot sales in Canada. So in other words, when you take into account people growing it for themselves, which was happening before it was legalized, and you take a look at the illicit drug trade, well, he hardly put a dent in it. Now, it's even worse than that, because he still hasn't been able, I'm talking about the government here, hasn't been able to put together an effective supply chain that can meet demand. That's a huge problem. And why would you even think about starting a business until you get all those ducks in a row? This is another classic example of government meddling in areas they have no business meddling in.
Right. And I'm generally a supporter of the free market, but I'm not a supporter of free market drug trade.
No. I'm just saying that.
But I hear you. But I think the most interesting thing about this is that, one of the key arguments that you heard over the years and continue to hear, when it comes to liberalizing or liberalizing drug laws or eliminating drug laws altogether. One of the key arguments that are advanced is the argument that you're going to again get rid of the black market in the drug trade. You're going to get rid of the criminal element.
Yeah,
in the drug
that was
trade.
the way they phrased it.
And so, you're going to make it safer. It's not going to be as expensive, and therefore, bad guys aren't going to want to get into the trade. And of course, everybody knows, if you know even the first thing about economics, and that is that you can make a whole lot of money selling things cheaply. You have a certain economy of scale, okay? So the more that you sell of an inexpensive product, and if you reduce the price, thereby selling more of it, depending on a couple of other factors, you're going to make a whole lot of money, even if the unit price that you're selling it for is not a whole lot of money. And so the thing is, you have to ask yourself is whether or not government control, licensing, regulation, etc., is actually making the product now. It's kind of the inverse. The illegal drug trade, people were making money doing it, and everyone was going, well, they're making so much money because it's illegal. And I'm saying, no, they're making that much money because that's what people are willing to pay, and they're going to continue to be willing to pay that after you've legalized. So the price of black market marijuana is not going to go down significantly, okay? But what will happen is the price of legal marijuana is going to go up.
Yeah.
Because now you have to produce it in a controlled environment. You have to be licensed. You have to market it in a certain way. So you have all of these extra regulatory costs and hoops that you have to jump through. And so what does that do? It actually drives people into the black market. So You're not going to get rid of the black market, and black markets being what they are, Nick, they're going to be controlled by criminal organizations.
That's why they're called black markets.
Okay, that's because if you're trading in the black market, by definition, you are a criminal.
Right.
Because it's a crime.
Now, the other thing that you got to keep in mind, first of all, the article says that we have reduced volumes by 100. Think about this now. This is nationwide. Reduced the volume of cannabis sold by the black market by 100 metric tons. 100 metric tons. There's 2,200 pounds to the metric ton. So you're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of pounds of this stuff. Now, okay, so how much are we actually consuming? And where are they getting it? I mean, let's face it. You cannot step into an already existing market, legal or otherwise, and simply shut the tap off. The people who are making their living, legally or otherwise, aren't going to take it. They'll become very creative. Look at cigarette smuggling as an example. Why is it that the only time we ever put a serious dent in the smuggling of cigarettes is when Mike Harris cut the taxes on tobacco to make it cheaper for people to buy it at the store without the risk that comes, and instead of from the smuggler and all the risks that come with that, like you don't know what's in it, yada yada. That's the only time we've ever been able to dramatically reduce any kind of smuggling or illegal trade that way. Now, they're not going to do that here because there's no taxes on it to begin with. That's another reason why people won't go to government stores, is because now they're going to get hit with whatever the price is plus 13% HST.
Right. It's always, there's never, I'm not aware of a single credible study that's been done on this topic, the idea of legalizing drugs, that demonstrates in any credible way, shape, or form how legalizing something and regulating it makes it safer and less expensive. Okay, it just doesn't. It doesn't. The legal pot. Okay, and I want to talk about prostitution in a second. Okay, because it's a related topic.
Right.
Okay, but the legal marijuana that's produced under certain controlled environment and that follows certain standards, which haven't been settled yet. Okay, but that legal marijuana may be safer, quote unquote, than the stuff that's being produced in an unregulated environment. Okay. But people being people, some are going to be willing to pay a higher price because they believe that they're getting a safer product. Okay. But most people are not going to want to do that. They're going to look for the cheaper product, and shrug their shoulders with respect to, safety and the quality of the product.
They'll take the risk.
Now, how this relates to prostitution, because this is the same argument essentially that we hear about legalizing prostitution. Okay. Or not legalizing prostitution, but bringing it into the mainstream, having legalized, bordellos. Okay. And licensing prostitutes so that if you have to have medical checks done, so that you have to prove that you're healthy, etc., that you're not carrying any kind of diseases, etc., in order to get a license. And you may have to go for a medical examination once a month or once every 2 months, etc. All of these things add costs. And of course, if you're not 18 or 19 or 21 years old, you can't get a license to practice prostitution. Okay. So the argument is, look, we're going to be helping these prostitutes. We're going to be putting them in a safer environment, because instead of plying their trade on the streets, now they can do it in an actual building or facility, a bordello. Okay. They have, their health is better because they have their license and they're having regular medical checkups, etc. Okay, and I'm going, no. That may be beneficial to a certain group of women or guys that are practicing this trade. Okay, but first of all, the people who infect prostitutes are not prostitutes. They're the people, the customers.
That's right.
So it's irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant whether you are having medical checks if you're a prostitute. That doesn't help you. That helps your customers. Okay? Unless your customers are getting medical checks and coming in with certificates, okay, before you're doing whatever you're doing, okay, it doesn't help you at all. So that's just a nonsensical statement altogether. But people being people, unfortunately, there are going to be people out there that are going to go, I could get it cheaper by going to an unregulated, unlicensed establishment. And who are the women? Who are the prostitutes? Who are the guys that are going to be plying their trade in unlicensed places? Underage, I mean, the people that can't get licenses.
Right.
Underage, not healthy, or whatever, okay? So the idea that you bring something into, you legalize it, you normalize it, you regulate it, you tax it, okay? Quite often what it ends up happening is that you actually end up promoting exactly the effect that you wanted to eliminate by legalizing and regulating and licensing it. And this is, I think, what you're seeing with marijuana as well. And, you know, if you're in the drug enforcement business, you understand what I'm about to say here, Nick, okay? The real problem with drugs is not the trade, the illegal trade in illegal drugs. The real drug trade, okay, is in the illegal trade of legal drugs.
Yeah, there's also the people forget that there is also a huge black market in legal drugs
That's
Oxycontin and different things like
precisely the point I'm making.
Yeah, so I'm just backing that up. I mean, people think that just because you suddenly regulate something, everything's going to be fine, and that's not true, because there's always going to be people who will skirt the regulations. You're going to always have people who are going to care more about the short-term profit rather than the long-term benefit, those kinds of things. And not that I'm against profit, absolutely not. But the bottom line is you're going to find people who are going to be in every culture, in every society, who don't care about their fellow citizens and are going to take advantage of whatever loopholes they can find, or they'll just completely ignore the law altogether.
Pregnant pause.
Yeah, that was meant for you to jump in there.
You were waiting for me to jump in.
That's why I did that.
Oh, man, I don't know.
Have we exhausted that horse?
Well, you know, I want to get back into playing some of that Cheech and Chong music. I'm tempted to look up in our music file, our audio files here.
Well,
Up in Smoke.
You know, we should. There's a great clip from that movie.
You notice what we're doing again,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I know. We're going back to movies. This is actually not a movie. It's from a long play record my uncle had, and it's about them sneaking into the theater, the drive-in, and they've got a bunch of people in the trunk. They only want to pay for one admission, right? So everybody else is in the trunk. Like, that trick's never been applied. So they get through the gate, and they get out of the trunk, and there's this, and I haven't heard in years, so I'm just going by memory, but one of them is outside the car going, they want to back up against the back fence. Keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. Bam! Far enough. That's the kind of, oh man, that is absolutely hilarious.
Now, it's funny because that reminds me of my parking at a friend's driveway today, where I'm thinking, he said park in the visitors lot, and I drove, or the visitors parking spot, and I drove by the visitors parking spot, and it was like 18 inches of snow there, a big drift and everything. So I go, well, as long as I got to park somewhere where there's deep snow, I might as well make my way into his driveway, and that's what I did. I backed up the car and I pushed, forward, and the front end of my car was under the snow, and but I got up there, and yeah, we got a lot of snow. There was a lot of snow in this storm.
Yeah, we keep coming back to that, don't we?
Well, not really, but it's mid-February, and the end is in sight for the winter.
Well, what was the name of that movie? Was it? There was a movie out that showed.
You have to describe it.
Okay, it was about climate change. It was about how North America went into this massive deep freeze, and the only thing left you could see out of the snow of the Statue of Liberty was their upper arm.
I want to say 2012. 2012.
Anyway, they find a guy living in the library, and he's got a fireplace going, and he's burning books.
To keep warm. Yeah, no, I remember that. It was, I think it was the name of the movie was 2012. I could be wrong, but I remember it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
utter complete malarkey.
Oh yeah, no, it's complete nonsense beginning to end. But no, it wasn't 2012.
You sure?
Yeah.
We're gonna look it up in the break. That's what we're gonna do.
Good idea. We'll look it up in the break because it's bugging me now.
Yeah, because it was the scientist, the climatologist that was trying to sound the alarm bells for everybody was the father of the kid that was trapped in the library.
Yeah, and they were walking across the snow and just to the top of apartment buildings, and
I remember that.
They had ocean freight.
But that was only in the New York area. Okay?
Yeah, that was
some sort of like an immediate deep freeze.
The movie started with a British helicopter flying along, and they hit one of these Arctic vortexes where all this minus 139 million degree vortex came down and froze the helicopter solid in mid-flight.
Allegedly.
This is in the movie.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And that's, I think, how the movie started.
I felt that way when our latest polar vortex was hitting us there last week.
Yeah, well, believe me, I was beginning to think maybe the movie wasn't that far off.
Right.
And let's face it, when you get a wind, I was driving from, where was I? I was driving into Mixburg from Pembroke, and there's a long straight flat in there. We had to go pick up some grain for the horses, and the long straight flat, the blowing snow across the road was so thick that I could see it drops down into a little valley, and I could see the road coming up on the far side about 2 miles away. But between me and that, I couldn't see the road at all. The only thing I could see was a little strip where the snowplow had caught the shoulder and shaved the grass off, and that's what I followed. It was that intense. It was just, the wind was a killer. So if you're out driving in stuff like that, you can't really stop, because if somebody doesn't see you, they're going to smack into the back end of you.
Right. Well, the typical whiteout, as you know, Nick, having grown up in this area, and that the typical whiteout is not actually snowfall; it's drifting snow. It's you rarely get a whiteout from the snow falling is very rarely so intense that you're going to have that whiteout as a result of it. It's usually when the snow starts blowing around. We're going to go for a break, and we're going to check that movie out, and we'll come back.
I have the answer, but I'll wait till after the break.
But Nick's going to, that's it. That's the teaser, guys. That's what we call that in the business. Okay.
That's right.
That's a teaser, and teasers, and then we're going to go into bumpers and stingers. This is a bumper.
That's right.
Okay. We'll be back on the other end.
Back with more on the Combat Zone with Nick and Joe. Okay, welcome back to the Combat Zone, folks. I'm Nick, he's Joe, and we have all kinds of things left to discuss. The name of the movie, by the way, is The Day After Tomorrow. Dennis Quaid plays in it, and he plays Jack Hall, a paleoclimatologist that must make a daring trek from Washington, D.C. to New York City to reach his son, trapped in the crosshairs of a sudden international storm, which plunges the planet into a new ice age.
Hours.
Yeah, just overnight, just boom, like that.
It wasn't even overnight. It was like hours.
Yep.
Like it was. I kind of remember. I seem to remember them running into the library as fast as they could because that cold air was chasing them.
Oh yeah, it was like an avalanche.
An abominable snowman.
Yeah, an abominable frozen lava coming after them or something.
It literally was snowcopolis.
Yeah, that was snowcopolis. Now, from a simply purely entertaining movie, without worrying about the science behind it, it was not bad. Came out in 2004. But if you were looking at that and saying, "Oh, wow, this is what we have to worry about," nothing even close.
Well, there are people out there that just, they worry about these things.
So that's the movie I was referring to. It's called Day After Tomorrow.
But there was one like 2012 or something like that. Like it was another one of these. The Earth is coming to an end because, a man did some sort of fracking and the crust of the Earth cracked or something like that. I can't remember what it was now exactly, but volcanoes behaving badly or something like that. I don't know.
I just did a quick Google search for the climate disaster movies, and you've got Duckla 61, Earthquake in Chile, The Impossible, The Quake, and of course the other one I just mentioned.
What about Twister? Twister was a good one, I think, right?
It was okay. Twister was okay.
Yeah.
It was like Tremors with Reba McEntire. I mean, the first one was, but then everyone after that got really stupid.
But wasn't Tremors about some sort of giant underground bug?
Yeah, it's like worms with teeth underground.
A worm with teeth underground.
Yeah, and they would come up from under the ground and going after people because they could feel the vibrations. Remember the movie Dune?
Dune was a miniseries, wasn't it? Never saw it. I know what you're talking about. It was one of those science fiction ones that
was one of the first movies Patrick Stewart was ever in.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
isn't that interesting?
House Harkonnen, they were fighting over this desert planet,
right? And
there was spice in the sand that they were harvesting.
I see. Dune was very popular when I was in high school.
Yep.
As a book. I never read it. I didn't like it. I didn't like the fad types of things. I've never been I'm an anti-faddist. There's faddism.
Yes.
I'm an anti-faddist.
Oh,
okay.
Well,
and there's Antifa and then there's
I'll
have to think. I have to think about that a little bit.
Yeah,
right?
We'll have to work on that. But
okay, so
Dune had in it these creatures that moved through the sand and sensed vibrations, and they were called sandworms, and they would go up and swallow whole harvesters, not just individuals. But so this Twister movie was not Twister. Tremors was. I won't say it was like that, but the creatures were similar. They would move through the earth unless you're standing on solid rock. If you were standing in dirt or sand, they would come up and just gobble you up whole. Dune
on Earth rather than
wherever they were.
Doom on Earth.
House Harkonnen.
Okay, we're way off topic here.
Okay.
We are way off topic.
Let's come back to what we were going to talk about.
Because we wanted to talk about
the
environment, whaling, right?
Yes, there's a whale of a story. It's a huge.
Whoa, Nick!
I've been waiting all night to be able to do that.
Nick, you have been waiting all night for that one. I know. That was one you wanted. You've been practicing, rehearsing that one for a few days now.
Oh, listen, thank you. The story is that Japan, I think it was last year, went a whaling, as Japan has done for years, decades, centuries even. That country feeds itself from the sea. They just don't have enough geography to be able to provide for their nation from an agricultural point of view. So they practice, whaling and fishing, and they are one of the largest consumers of fish on the planet. There's 100 million Japanese, and they all got to eat. Well, so now I don't know how big a role whales play in their diet, but they certainly do a fair amount of whaling. And Greenpeace and the World Wildlife Fund and the Sea Shepherd are all outraged about this. And they went last year down and harvested 333 minke whale from the Antarctic. And there's a huge outcry because 133 of them were pregnant. And it's just, oh my God, I can't believe. And it's all over Twitter. And it's all over, I believe it's on Twitter. No, it's on the Combat Facebook page. And, cause that's where I posted the story. And there's been a lot of back and forth about that. And the very first thing I said to begin the discussion, or to add my 2 cents to the discussion, was that what's the population of the minke whale to begin with? I mean, to say that you're outraged about the death of 122 whales, okay, even pregnant ones, that doesn't mean anything. It's like saying running into a room and screaming 42. I mean, unless you give it context, the number's meaningless. So how many whales are there that are of that subspecies, the minke whale, which is a baleen whale? They screen krill. They're not like a killer whale, or they're not like a, other versions of whale. These actually squeeze. I'm not really up on
other species.
Other species. So they have these long fibrous things in their mouth. They squeeze the water out and consume the krill.
Right.
Anyway, I know how they eat. I just don't know what they're called.
Right. No, I get it. I'm teasing you, Nick. You know that.
Yes, I certainly hope so, because you know how fragile I am.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they went down and they harvest these whales, but the thing that's not provided, and I read the story, and, of course, the Sea Shepherd is outraged, and, everybody's all up in arms about it.
Didn't they sink the Sea Shepherd at one point in time? Isn't that the ship?
The Sea Shepherd should have been sunk years ago.
Wasn't that? I thought that was, or was it Rainbow Warrior, maybe?
It sank at the jetty.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't know if anybody...
It was like French... No, it was French Secret Service agents or something that planted a mine on it or whatever.
Or something like that. It could be.
Sort of it's coming back from the deep recesses of my mind, right? Yeah. Something like that. Might have been the Rainbow Warrior. That rings a bell, too.
Oh, maybe that was it. Maybe that's the one they sank, was the Rainbow Warrior.
I don't remember.
I'd have to look it up, and I don't have that much interest in it.
We don't really care.
No, I don't.
I don't care.
Because I think these people are pirates. They break all the international
The thing
rules.
is like this is that those ships are going to sink anyway. Eventually, they use them in so recklessly. It's,
I'm surprised the Japanese Navy hasn't come along and sunk them. I really am, because they break every rule of maritime international law.
I think the Japanese have sworn off doing that for a little while.
Well, it's been a while since they did it last.
It is.
They do have the right to defend their own interests.
To a degree.
Yeah, well, if you're interfering with their commerce.
To a degree. I hear you.
Anyway, that said, the other point that you pointed out, and I want to give you credit for it, because one of the things that these people who get all upset about this, and I haven't heard a word out of the person I was debating with since that. Now, maybe he's turned off the computer and walked away. I don't know. But there's been nothing from him since I posted the information. I said to him, based on your prompting, what if I told you that the United States was responsible for the death of 45,800,000 creatures since 1970? Would you be as outraged? And he said, well, and it says there were 638,000 in 2015 alone. Would you be as outraged as you are about the whales? And he said, absolutely. I said, oh, so you realize, of course, we're talking about human beings. That's the abortion figure since 1970 to 2015. 45 million people have died.
In the United States alone.
And he said, well, that's a mother's choice. I said, so you care more about whales than you do about your own kind. And since then, I've heard nothing from him.
Right.
Because
because you're an extremist, Nick.
Yeah. Just pointing out hypocrisy makes me an extremist. I'm anybody who knows me knows I'm adamantly pro-life.
Right.
And that means from conception to natural death.
Right.
And there's been a lot of movement in the pro-life organizations in the States, thanks to, and I got to give credit where it's due, Donald Trump has been behind a lot of it. And I think that's all good news.
He's certainly helped. I think he's given the pro-life movement a shot in the arm.
He certainly has. And the numbers, when I was looking at them, they have been steadily falling. They hit a peak in 1997 of 1.4 million abortions. And this is just in the United States. This isn't worldwide. This isn't including Canada. This is just in the States. 1.4 million in 1997, and now they're down to 638,000. They've cut the number in half. Less than half. More than half. So if the current trend continues, that's a very, very, very good sign.
Right.
So
I don't know what the trend is in Canada. It's very difficult to get accurate abortion statistics in Canada. But the point that you're making, Nick, I think is extremely important. And that is that, typically, I don't want to overgeneralize, but typically the people who are the most outraged about harming, animals, harming fish, for pity's sake, harming frogs, harming minnows in ditches,
or the blending turtle.
Nick, okay, people are going to be listening. They're going, oh, come on, what's he on about? Okay. Well, you and I know, because we personally experienced with our friends, okay, instances where the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, would prevent farmers from changing or repairing culverts at the end of their driveway, which was passing over, a ditch because there was water in the ditch and there were possibly minnows in that water, and they were demanding that the farmer had to have some sort of an environmental impact study. Okay. And I'm thinking it's not just reductio ad absurdum. Okay. It's not just the stupidest examples, and practices, of crazy environmentalism. Okay. But when you think about the utter disregard for human life that these people feel, okay, it's mind-boggling that a person who is willing to go out and risk their lives to save 42 whale babies, okay, not only do they ignore 600,000 plus abortions in the United States in the year, what was it, 2013, was it? 2015? Not only do they ignore it, but they're as passionate and as vehement about defending abortion. And I think what puzzles me the most, Nick, is that they don't pause and ask themselves, does this make sense? And what am I doing here? And that to me is the real issue for me. I think that if you think about it and you come out on the pro-abortion side, that there's something flawed in your thinking. But we're not even getting to the point where people think about it.
Yeah.
At least the ones that are out there defending the whales. And I know, I'm sure there are whale defenders out there and baby seal defenders out there who absolutely, guppy, baby frogs are guppies, right? For those of you who don't know this, guppy defenders out there, who are also pro-life or anti-abortion. I'm sure there are. But I think they're the exception. And I find it fascinating and puzzling that that's the case.
I don't get it either, but your story about people who will do crazy things in defense of creatures much, while ignoring what's happening to their own kind reminds me of a story back when I was heavily involved in land grants and telling those stories. There was a farmer who had cleaning out a ditch on his property, and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans got involved, and they wanted to do a inspection of the ditch to make sure there were no endangered species of fish in this thing. It was a drainage ditch. It's not a natural water course. It's a drainage ditch. He dug himself. But
I think there were probably mosquito larvae, but,
Yeah, and we got to protect mosquito larvae.
Yeah, right. Well, we're not allowed to exterminate mosquito larvae.
We all like West Nile virus. Anyway, they brought down a diver. The water is 18 inches deep. And here's a diver, a scuba diver, in the ditch looking for minnows. That's not enough water to cover the tank. That's the kind of lunacy you get into when you allow yourself to be so caught up in the rightness of your cause that you never step back and says, does this make sense? Yeah, no kidding. Absolutely.
Really stupid thing.
Oh, man. All right. I didn't know we were going to have two segments of that.
I wanted to throw that in there anyway. I wanted to throw that in there anyway. It was just being, stupid people doing stupid things. Of course, I had to I didn't disengage the auto ducking, so it sounded
kind of muted.
It sounded kind of weird, but right. People will appreciate the fact that we were trying to be, somewhat entertaining at the same time that we were being serious, Nick.
Okay.
And that's kind of like us.
I want to move on to one
Nick
more.
and Joe.
Kind of serious, but kind of silly.
How come you're always first, Nick?
What's that?
How come it's not Joe and Nick? No, it doesn't really roll off the tongue like Nick and Joe. You're right. We have to stick with Nick and Joe.
That's right, because it won't work otherwise. I'll stomp out. No. The last topic I want to get into tonight, the city of Ottawa, and I want to make this much broader than the city of Ottawa. There's a broader question to this. But for those of you listening outside the geographical region of Ottawa, if you don't know, they have spent untold mountains of treasure for the better part of a decade now trying to put in what we lovingly have referred to as the LRT or the never coming train. Now there's the mayor is famous for saying on time and on budget on this particular project. Well, that was several years ago when they've moved the benchmark 3 times now.
Wasn't that 4 degrees and wasn't that 4 delays and 13 breaking the budget?
Yeah.
Announcements ago.
Oh yeah. It's not yesterday.
When he was talking about on time and on budget,
yeah,
he was talking about piling on in both cases.
Oh my God.
We're gonna add on to the budget.
Yeah.
And add on time.
Well, it's funny because
I just came up with that now,
that's very good. But the point I'm trying to make is...
I keep forgetting to turn my mic on.
It makes it easier to understand you when you do that.
Well, only our listeners.
And we have one. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is this has been a long, stretched-out dog's breakfast. This has been screwed up over and over and over again. And the Rapid Transit Committee, or the RTC as it's more affectionately known around these parts, has promised that they're going to hit the target this time. And the mayor said, well, how do we know you're going to hit it this time if you haven't hit it twice before? And I'm thinking, no, Mr. Mayor, it's not just twice. This has been going on forever. They keep pushing it back and back and back. But they say that by March 31st, they're going to have it ready to hand over the keys so the train can roll on April 1st. I'll believe that when I'm standing on it.
Right.
But the question...
And what could go wrong with... could go wrong with starting up on April Fool's Day?
Nothing I can think of.
No.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
The whole thing is an ongoing April Fool's joke. But the greater question is does it really make sense for governments of any size? Well, let's take it certainly at the municipal level, regardless of what city you're talking about, to manage these mega projects. Is it not wiser? Now, I know they used to do that. And in Ottawa, we have an example of how it could be done. And that's the Ottawa International Airport. That was done by a private firm. It was brought on on time, under budget, and is a world-class
right.
airport.
The expansion was, the original construction of the airport was under government, but the expansion, and it's now run as a private corporation.
Right. So, in other words, the private sector got involved, did its thing, and then handed it over to the city and said, there you go. And that's, condensing a long story into a short one. But why isn't that the way that we do things now? Why is it that any city has to be involved in the minutia of it? Just give them benchmarks to hit, penalties if they don't, and bonuses if they do. And let them get it done.
Well, there's no reason why we can't do things, our infrastructure projects that way. None whatsoever. And it makes sense to do it that way. And look, the reality is that as a general rule, that actually is the way that infrastructure development is handled already. The city owns the LRT, but the city is not building the LRT. The city is let contracts for the building of it, and in this case, it's for better or worse, it actually happens to be the private sector company that has been missing the targets that they themselves had guaranteed they'd be able to meet. I think the bigger question is whether or not the city is competent because of the nature of any large political bureaucracy, whether or not the city is competent to be running these infrastructure projects after they're completed. I think that's a bigger question. Generally speaking, the private sector does things because of the profit motive and wanting to, always paying attention to the bottom line, that the work that they do generally is more efficient. It's more cost effective, than if the city was doing it. So why not take some of that capacity, some of that competency, and put it into actually running some of the services that we own and operate as a government. And we're saying the city, but it could easily be the province, or it could be the state, or it could be the national government, the federal government, whether you're here in Canada or the United States, or frankly anywhere else. So let's take public transit, for instance. Okay, you have a bus system. Why is it that we insist that the bus system is going to be owned and operated by the city, by the government? Why cannot the government say, we want the private sector to operate these buses, okay, and operate the bus system, and let them bid on it, and then take, and you don't always have to take the low bid. Well, you could take, there was I was in some jurisdictions over a period of time where construction bids were, the standard bidding process was that you got, let's say, if you had 5 companies that were bidding on the same project, that you would always take the best bid. And the best bid is not necessarily always the lowest bid. So there's a strong argument for not taking the lowest bid. I'll get into that in a second. But the practice here was you threw out the lowest bid and you threw out the highest bid, and then you took what was left in between, and you came up with the average, and the bid that was closest to the average was the one that got the contract. The problem, of course, with taking the lowest bid is that everybody then wants to cut prices, and then you end up in a situation where they don't have any kind of room to deal with changes, et cetera. So construction companies go bankrupt all the time because of this. Right. Anyway, but getting back to your main point, should the government be doing these things? I think there's definitely room for, private sector companies generally are involved in the construction, the development. The bigger question, I think, is shouldn't the private sector be more involved in the actual delivery of service and the running of these infrastructure projects after they've been built and turned over?
That's a very good question that we don't have time to answer. I do think that you could probably run a viable train service on the tracks now occupied by VIA if it were in private hands. Same thing with the air carriers. If you removed a lot of the regulations, there's all kinds of things here that could be done.
Well, air carriers are private, so why shouldn't everybody else be private?
Yeah, but they face a lot of government regulations that make it difficult for them to operate.
That's true. Fair enough.
Sympathetic to air carriers, and not just because of my passion for planes, but because as a member of the traveling public, why should I have to pay $500 to fly to Winnipeg? If I go south of the border, I can get on a plane and fly for $500 to Europe. How come?
I could probably fly. It's probably cheaper to fly from Ottawa to London, England, than it is for me to fly to Vancouver.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good question. I wish I had an answer to that.
So do I.
Anyway, what can you do when you live in a shoe, Nick?
Well, you can sign off and say goodnight, and we're glad you're all out there. We certainly want to remind you to become Patreon supporters of us if you're not already. Please do that. You'll help us send the message out in a more broad way. We look for you all again next week. Good night, and God bless. We'll see you all then. Okay.